Welcome to the second annual ARM annual member briefing. We decided last year to take advantage of the folks gathered here for the meeting on the Mesa to give ARM members in particular a more ARM-specific review of what we've been doing on your behalf over the last year. Many of you are personally involved in the work that ARM does, or members of your team are, but sometimes it's just nice to have it all pulled together in one place. So I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview of the last year for us. You have a little bit of time for Q&A. And then the one important piece of business we need to do here is you all are invested with the authority to approve the 2020 Board of Directors slate for ARM. And my board member and friend Phil Vanek will be here to kind of lead us through that process at the end. So we're going to go through a couple things. We'll go through just some 2019 highlights. I want to tell you a little bit about how we're doing on membership, what ARM as an organization looks like today. We have some new staff I'd like to introduce to you. Then we'll spend a chunk of the time talking about what we're doing in policy and advocacy, both in the United States and in Europe. We have some cool things going on in the S&T domain. ARM has a couple of affiliated organizations that you may or may not be familiar with I'd like to just touch on. We've developed some new resources for members to take advantage of. I'm going to tell you about those. And then, as I mentioned, we'll have this 2020 Board of Directors vote. So, on to the highlights. So, 68 new organizations have joined ARM this year. I see Elise Osborne, our head of membership engagement, smiling there in the back. She's done a great job. It's really been a season of growth, obviously for the sector as a whole, but also for ARM. We're now at 345 members, which is a big number and growing, and we're super excited about that. This is our first meeting on the Mesa here in Carlsbad. Many of you joined us at the Estancia in La Jolla for many years and loved it there as we did, but we just got too big. So here we are in a bigger venue, and we're expecting as many as 1,200 attendees here. So hopefully you'll have a chance to have some terrific conversations and some good partnering meetings while you're here. We held a brand new meeting this year, a kind of companion to this meeting on the Mesa. We started something called the Meeting on the Med, which we're holding in Barcelona. We had this year and will again next year. We weren't really sure how that would go, to tell you the truth, because we wanted to kind of create in Europe the same sort of opportunity for information gathering and sharing and partnership that we have here. But obviously, when we started the Meeting on the Mesa, or the founders started it, there was a lot less competition for cell and gene meetings. And there are a lot of cell and gene meetings now, as you, I'm sure, have noticed by your inbox. And we were thrilled, though, about how that went. And it really was absolutely like this meeting, slightly smaller, but we had more than 400 people attend, and it really was a really great meeting, thanks to the involvement of our European members and others. And the partnering system there is as it is here, and really gave people a chance to get some business done. Speaking of the Meeting on the Med, one of the things that really highlights ARM this year is the fact that we've had a lot more engagement in Europe. Maybe I have to learn to say the UK and Europe, I don't know. We'll find that out soon enough. But we've been active both in the continent and in the UK. In particular, we've had a lot more engagement with the EMA and with Guido Rossi. We hired an outside firm to help us with media visibility and engagement, and that's led to some really nice stories about the work that we're doing on behalf of the sector. We released a European market access report. We did some original analysis of what is happening in the reimbursement landscape in Europe, in the 5 key markets. What are the barriers and how could we overcome them? We'll talk a little bit more about that later. And we released our first ever country-specific report. Many of you may be familiar with the reports that we do that describe the sector globally, sometimes regionally. We've never done one to just look at an individual country. And this year we did one on the UK, partnered with our friends at Catapult and the BIA. And these reports not only are a great snapshot of what's happening in a place, but they're also a great tool for us to then have additional conversations with regulators, policymakers, and the like, because they show kind of the significance and the importance of this sector in a geographic region which tends to get the attention of policymakers. So I think we'll do more of those. We'll talk through the rest of the presentation today about sort of our deepening relationship with legislators, regulators, and policymakers and payers, in the United States. And there's sort of growing recognition of our role in those conversations. We had a really busy summer. We launched something called the Therapeutic Developers Statement of Principles, which was our point of view, the point of view of therapeutic developers active in using gene editing in their development process. Obviously, there's been a lot of international dialogue around germline gene editing in particular, and we felt that there was not really a sufficient involvement of the commercial sector's voice in that debate, given the amount of work that's happening in gene editing, and so we set about to change that, and I think we're successful in doing that. We've launched a couple of new member resources that are, I think, really, based on our early feedback, really helpful to member companies, and we'll talk some about that over the course of this presentation. And then our visibility, our overall media visibility has really increased this year thanks to these activities I've just described. And media activity is sort of part of what I think of as kind of a virtuous circle. The more attention we get from the media, the more members we get, the more policymakers care what we have to say about things, the more influence we can have. So it's really meant not just to be kind of a feather in our cap, but part of an overall strategy of building the influence of this sector with decision makers who count. So our membership. So I mentioned that we're up to 345 members. This is the geographical breakdown of those members. As you can see, we're primarily in North America, but we have really meaningful membership contribution from Europe and Israel, growing representation in Asia. I don't expect this pie chart to change significantly over the next year, but we are doing more and more work, as I said, in Europe and doing more and more to attract European member companies. If we look at the membership by primary technology, you can see we're pretty spread evenly between cell therapy and gene therapy, with a significant pie of cell and gene therapy. We also have a number of research organizations, service providers, not-for-profits. If you look at the membership by size, you can see here on this right-hand side, first of all, about 3/4 of our members are company members, a quarter not. That actually is something we talk about a lot and is significant in our conversations with policymakers. Everybody loves a good trade association. There's nothing wrong with a plain old trade association, but we find, and we actually did some survey work about this when I first arrived at ARM, that to be representative of the sector in a slightly larger context, to represent both the companies in the space as well as patient groups, research institutions, and the like, gives us a little extra credibility among policymakers. And so this distribution of the membership is important. If you drill into the corporate slice of the pie there, you can see that most of the members are small companies, fewer than 50 employees, less than $50 million in revenue, most of them pre-revenue. But we also are, one of the trends that I have noticed in my time here is certainly as large cap biotech and large pharma has gotten more interested in the space, they've also gotten more interested in ARM. So we've also seen some growth in the large company membership. If you look at the new members, I don't think there's really so much of a story here. The new members fall pretty much in line with the traditional membership breakdown that we've had. But here you can take a look at what those 68 new members look like. And here are the list of the new members that have joined the organization this year. Okay, so with those new members, of course, comes the need for new staff on the part of ARM, and of course, sometimes there are transitions that need to be filled. I think Mike Lemke, I was hoping to introduce, but is, as it turns out, busy running a meeting next door. Mike joined us from J&J to run the science and technology activities of the organization. He spent a long time in the R&D group at J&J, and before that, in their device subsidiary. He joined us sort of early in the second quarter, I think, and as hopefully many of you have gotten to know him. If not, you will do. He's leading a couple of really interesting projects for us. Elise Osborne, who I mentioned earlier. Elise, will you raise your hand back there? Elise is our new Director of Member Engagement. So she both is, her job is to make sure that if you're already a member and you want to know more about how you can get more out of ARM, that she helps you do that. And she is sort of the point of the spear in our reaching out to new prospective members. She has an MPH from New York University. And she's heard me say this a bunch of times, but she sold us on that she'd be good at ARM membership because she said at one point in her earlier career, her job was to convince food cart owners in the Bronx to carry more fresh fruit. And I thought, if you can do that, then this will probably seem easy. So she's been great. AP Murphy, are you here? AP Murphy, many of you may have been in touch with. She's the new executive and committee coordinator, so she's the one managing all of the committee meeting schedules and the calendar invites and the minutes and all those important things. And Jeanette Lazuski joined our events team. So believe it or not, this whole event gets put on by 3.5 events people. We actually do 6 events through the course of the year, and the team we have is really outstanding, and Jeanette is a terrific addition to that team. So now, this is what on my little confidence monitor, Adam, you're cut off, but I'm glad to see you're not on the thing up there. This is the team that we have now. The people in bold are full-time staff. Those not bolded are consultants for the organization, part-time consultants, but as you'll recognize their names, many of them work a significant portion of their time for ARM and have for some time, so they're a vital part of the team. Okay, policy and advocacy. So, I included here a quote from BioWorld, who described us in the context of a story about this gene editing work I described earlier as the lobby group that is now the most influential in the field. So clearly that is part of what we aim to do, is to be able, by really focusing exclusively on cell and gene medicine and tissue engineering, to really be able to drive the issues that are important to this sector forward without the dilution of having a lot of other stakeholders inside of our tent. And I think thanks to the team of folks working on it, we've been able to do that. These efforts are led, for those of you who know our team, are led in Europe. We have 2 people in Europe. Annie Hubert is based in Brussels, and Paolo Marghesi is based in Switzerland. They lead our efforts in Europe, and Rob Falb and Michael Werner lead the efforts here in the United States, and they're with us. So if you have any hard questions, they'll answer them. So our number one priority in 2019 when it came to policy and advocacy was really US market access. We understand that market access and getting a healthy reimbursement environment is important globally, but the feeling was if we didn't get it right in the United States, it really wasn't going to matter if we got it right elsewhere, so we needed to make sure and really try to prioritize the US environment. I won't go through this whole slide, but just to say that within that sort of overall bucket of trying to drive the adoption of new payment models and value-based reimbursement, which is really about kind of enabling companies to enter into payment over time arrangement with payers and pay for performance arrangements with payers. Within that, there's a distinct set of issues that for now at least are affecting the CAR T companies and the cell therapy companies that are delivered on an inpatient basis, and a set of issues that are prominent that have more to do with price reporting requirements of Medicare and Medicaid. So that's what those sort of two boxes in the middle are. One, to try to remove those barriers to these the price reporting barriers in Medicare and Medicaid, and the other was to try to adapt the DRG, or something called the NTAP. These are all things related to the inpatient system of Medicare in order to enable an appropriate reimbursement for CAR-T. So how are we doing on these goals? Well, we're doing okay. I think it's fair to say we've had some definite accomplishments over the course of this year. There is legislation moving its way through the U.S. Congress to affect drug pricing generally, and in there we've succeeded in getting a provision that would allow for some of these kind of novel payment models that I'm describing to be implemented in Medicaid for gene therapies for rare disease. That bill has a long way to go, but it's a start. Anyway, it's something that we've really been trying to accomplish. We do that through kind of tools that you may be perfectly well familiar with. We lobby Congress directly. We do that ourselves as lobbyists, and we do that with the help of the membership. So every year, ARM has a fly-in, and this year we had more than 90 meetings with legislators on Capitol Hill and members of the ARM community talking to policymakers on a state-by-state basis. So we assemble teams of people from Pennsylvania to go see the Pennsylvania members and so forth about why these issues, these changes in this arcane subject, right, Medicare and Medicaid price reporting rules, is really essential in getting cell and gene therapies to patients. We organized some congressional briefings and the like, and all of those things contributed to our being able to get this provision in the Senate Finance Committee bill. We also had a lot of direct engagement with CMS, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, the people who make this inpatient set of decisions about CAR-T reimbursement. They were multifaceted, those interactions, but did help to accomplish some improvement in the reimbursement system for CAR-Ts. This NTAP I described earlier went up. They adopted what's called a national coverage decision, which is a good thing, and the particulars of the national coverage decision were good from our point of view. And that they said they will contemplate a new DRG, in other words, a whole new kind of category of payments, because right now, certainly in the public payer side of things, the Medicare and Medicaid reimbursement for CAR-T doesn't come close to covering the cost of a provider and a clinical institution to provide it. Upcoming, we also have done some things with the commercial payers through an organization called the National Association of Managed Care Physicians, NAMCP. We've done a couple of workshops with the chief medical officers of these managed care plans about kind of what's their knowledge of cell and gene therapy, what are their questions about it, how are they thinking about covering these kind of therapies, what questions do they have, and the like. And it's produced a couple of documents. The one that just came out, I think in the last couple of days, is a roadmap for managed care access, which is really meant for some of our smaller member companies who have therapies in process to really think about. This is what the payer community is telling us they need you to think about if you want to get covered from a managed care plan. And then lastly, we have done a study on the potential cost savings of cell and gene therapies for the next decade in Medicare. For those of you who are at the ARM Foundation board meeting this morning, they're also working on some modeling of the value of cell and gene therapies. They have a very robust effort underway. This is a more limited analysis, but it is meant to be a credible analysis of how looking at a couple of different indications and what those indications currently cost Medicare and Medicaid, how it is that a cell therapy, a cell or gene therapy, could, even at various price points, still be a net benefit to the Medicare and Medicaid system. And that analysis should be completed in Q4 and will become, part of our toolkit for using in advocacy going forward. So on the U.S. regulatory side, we also, we agree with the ARM Board of Directors on a couple of high-level goals, and that's what I'm going to go through with you today. Of course, there are other things we're doing in the regulatory space or in the market access space, but I just wanted to highlight a few of these that are at the kind of board level. On the U.S. regulatory side of things, it's actually been our observation that we think that the expedited approval pathway, the RMAT, is working quite well. You know, we've confirmed that it includes gene therapy. Companies are not telling us that their main bottleneck is getting a product through the FDA approval process. What they are telling us is that the challenge in the regulatory environment is on the CMC requirements. And that's not that there's a conflict with the FDA, but rather that just the CMC related guidance that the FDA has crafted wasn't built with cell and gene therapy in mind, and it just needs to be updated to reflect the modern realities of the space and what we know and what we don't know. And so we've had a very close interaction with the agency on that topic. I won't go through kind of all the bullets on this slide, but to say that we've both talked to them directly, we've engaged them in some S&T projects that we have underway that relate to the manufacturing of these unique products. We organized a comparability workshop. Defining comparability is one of the key issues at hand, not easily determined. So we, along with USP, organized a comparability workshop and had participation from the FDA and the EMA in that workshop to sort of share questions, best practices, where should we go next kind of feedback. And then we've responded to sort of formal guidance documents that the agency is in the process of updating. I think what the group that's really handling this inside of the organization is focused on is also defining what is it. It's fine, we can tell the agency what we think about the ideas that they already have on the table, but we're also trying to define what are the things that the agency doesn't already have a guidance around that we could use a guidance around, and to talk to them about that. The result of these efforts, we won't know for a little while longer. We're expecting a number of guidances to be issued, final guidances to be issued by the agency, which we, of course, are hoping will reflect this input that we have provided to them. And they have made clear that they are working on a CAR-T specific guidance, which is something that we had talked to them about. On the European market access front, the goal that we had agreed to with the ARM board was really to produce this document that I described to you, this consensus report in which we brought together a number of key opinion leaders from across Europe to really coalesce a summary of the key opportunities and challenges for market access in the top 5 European markets. We've used that to kind of build a set of relationships with other stakeholders in the field who share our point of view about what needs to get done to get ATMPs, as we call them in Europe, to patients. So it's the release of this report, which came out in the summer, has been useful in our kind of coalition building around the advocacy that we intend to undertake next year to try to accomplish specific country level changes to improve the market access environment. For those of you who may be there, we are holding a stakeholder workshop around this report and these recommendations in Brussels in December. And obviously part of our mission there is to communicate it to policymakers in Brussels to get their reaction. Just stepping back for a minute about the environment in Europe in general, we do feel that there have been some good news. There's been some good news in the European environment this year, both with expedited coverage decisions for the CAR-Ts, with novel payment models for ATMPs in the UK and Germany, and a number of reasonably positive pricing and reimbursement decisions. So we're sort of pleased with the direction of things. On the European regulatory front, many of the key challenges that we've identified and prioritized this year have to do with clinical trials in Europe, clinical trial requirements, related to GMOs and other things which are making clinical trials in Europe challenging for member companies. So we've done an analysis of the clinical trial situation, if you will, in Europe. We did a member survey about challenges members are facing. We've engaged with key regulators about the findings of those things, and will continue to do so. We've also, I'd say, came on a little later in the year, was a renewed emphasis on the hospital exemption in Europe and the challenge that the hospital exemption is creating for therapeutic developers in the country. And for those of you who know this issue, the hospital exemption is being implemented in diverse ways depending upon the member state involved, and that's part of the challenge for therapeutic developers. But in general, it's being used more and more, and that is fundamentally the challenge for therapeutic developers. This bit of an eye chart is just meant to show you that part of what ARM does for members in the policy and advocacy space is sort of speak for the sector. So often agencies, FDA, EMA, ICER, the Department of Health and Human Services, the White House, will seek input on a given topic. And of course, many individual members of ARM submit comments on their own, and that is as it should be. But what ARM does is try to bring together a point of view of the sector as a whole, write that up and submit it. And in so doing, it can create, sometimes it has a bit of extra influence over the process because it's a consensus view of the sector. And we've done that no fewer than a dozen times so far this year. Last year, we did this more than 20 times on topics ranging from the ICER value model to the White House's drug pricing, proposed pricing reforms and changes to these price reporting rules that I described earlier, to sort of specific gene therapy, CMC related guidance. So all of these, when we do something like this, we put it on the website. So it's available to you to understand what is it we're saying is the point of view of the sector. And we arrive at that point of view through a committee process. Most of you probably know, but it's worth saying that all of ARM's committees are open to all ARM members. You can have 10 people on every ARM committee, if that's what you want to do, have at it. We would welcome that participation. Or if you just want what you really care about is market access in Europe, you can have your person on the European Market Access Committee. But all of this kind of comes from the expertise and the energy of the membership guided by an ARM staff person. So there's just the rest of the list. Okay, so I mentioned science and technology a couple of times, and as I said, Mike isn't here, so I'll do my best to represent his work. What we're trying to do in the science and technology space is develop best practices and educating around them for the workforce of the member companies. And that's around robust manufacturing processes, quality control, and other topics. So the main activity at the moment is a project called A-Gene, and it's modeled after something that happened some years ago in the monoclonal antibody world called AMAB, thus our wildly creative title, A-Gene. But what was found in the case of monoclonal antibodies was just an understanding that a lot of people were struggling with manufacturing and that there were some best practices worth sharing. And that we feel is the same thing that's happening in the gene therapy side of things. And in fact, regulators have told us as much. So A-Gene is a process, is meant to be a book of knowledge around an AAV case study that covers a range of different topics and includes a sort of regulatory component. There are, I think, Adam, 20-some chapters to this book at present, and 10 chapters, 20-plus member companies involved in them. So companies are writing those chapters along with the technical writer and facilitation on the part of ARM. And that should be a tool for, one of the things we know about this sector, right, and what we hear often from members is that they're staffing up, right? Hiring companies are growing like mad, and they're drawing on people. There just aren't that many cell and gene experts in the world. So folks are hiring people from adjacent spaces, right? From other life sciences companies who may have plenty of manufacturing expertise, but not in this space. So this tool is sort of meant to be a workforce help for companies who are bringing lots of folks into their companies, and to give them a little bit of a faster on-ramp to the specifics of cell and gene therapy. We're doing a cell therapy companion to Agene. Agene should be done and out, at least its first instantiation, in the first quarter, and there'll be a follow-on cell therapy process. We tend to hold a CMC summit of the manufacturing experts of our member companies every December to both check in on this progress that we've been making, the projects that we're working on, but also to define the priorities for the following year. Again, this is open to all our member companies. This year we're going to have that in Raleigh-Durham, given just the amount of manufacturing that's going on there. It seemed a logical place for us to do it. All right. So ARM has a gene editing task force that includes nearly all, if not all, of the therapeutic developers currently using gene editing technologies, as well as a number of organizations who are either suppliers or advisors to that.
Test a 1 2 1 2 1.
Okay. Okay, so we have this gene editing task force. This year was to get themselves involved in this international dialogue on gene editing, which I earlier. Creating, I feel like I'm going in and out. Am I going in and out? Now I'm mostly in. Okay. I'll keep watching the faces and reading my audience. So we put together a gene editing statement of principles. And that statement of principles was really, I mean, for all of the work it involved, right, it actually turned out to be a fairly simple document. And our objectives there were to help the world understand where the commercial sector is, which is focused on somatic cell gene editing, that there's a world of gene editing which is kind of the world of germline gene editing. Plain that's where the companies were operating, was on the somatic cell side of things, and that the company's point of view was that we weren't ready to be doing germline gene editing in humans, in human clinical trials, and that we wanted to say that. Eric Lander and others, this is kind of freaking me out, have talked about a moratorium, and we deliberately did not choose to endorse a moratorium for a variety of reasons I'm happy to talk about, but we did want to say we did not think it was appropriate at this time. That document was signed by 14 preeminent companies in the space. It's still available if you happen to represent an organization that falls into this category. The document is still open for signature. I think the member companies who've signed it have found it to be a useful tool for them. It's certainly a lot of attention from the media and from the national academies and the WHO and other international organizations that are looking at what kind of new rules, regulations, practices, and policies they want to put in place in this space. So please get in touch with us if you are in this world and haven't been a part of this conversation, because we would welcome you into it. Now, communications and education. I mentioned at the outset that we've created some new tools for you, just to highlight a few of them. We have a data partnership with Informa. We use their kind of subscriptions, which many of you may also use, as an initial data set, and then we curate it using the cell and gene therapy, regenerative medicine expertise that's extant in our team. And out of that, we compile our own data set, and we're currently tracking 950 companies active in regenerative medicine. And on a quarterly basis, we produce a report about the sector, about the company, clinical trials ongoing, the indications they're addressing, and the like. And all of that is available for your use. We produce it in beautiful infographic form, so you can drop it into your PowerPoints, which is exactly the point of it. And it helps us communicate to the outside world what's going on in the sector. So global data, we do it on a regional basis. We'll look at Europe, the US. I mentioned that we've done this indication-specific report. So if you make it to the ARM website, you'll see there's regenerative medicine for rare disease, for example, for oncology, that will give you a little bit deeper dive into the therapeutics that are underway in those spaces. We also launched 2 new databases for you this year. One is a database of those products that have received expedited regulatory approval. That's globally, so Japan, Europe, as well as in the United States and other countries. So this was something we were just asked for often, and so we decided to provide it on an ongoing basis to the media, you, and anybody else who might like it. And we also have a database of anticipated clinical data readouts and clinical trial milestones. And that comes from an ongoing survey of public announcements, as well as information that companies provide to us specifically for this purpose. So that is newly created and newly available to you on the website. Thanks for those who were part of the beta project. But that is also something we get asked about quite often. It's essentially what's coming. All of that's available to you at the website, which is listed here. This is just a list of some of the other reports and analyses that we have done that are available to you at the website. Okay, so throughout the year, we have a monthly members-only briefing that we produce and deliver to your inbox once a month. It includes both key developments, policy developments in the sector, but also it's probably the easiest way for you to keep track of what ARM is doing for you. It has kind of highlights of major events and also details about what various committees are doing if you're trying to keep track of that. We've got, it says here, about 4,000 subscribers already, so everybody on your team can get this if you'd like, and just sign up here through Caitlin or the website. So I mentioned I would say a few things about ARM affiliate organizations. We have 2 main affiliate organizations to mention. One is the ARM Foundation. The ARM Foundation was formally created many years ago, but it was really activated and launched with an independent board in January of 2018. And its purpose is really to focus on the educational needs of the sector. And it's been led with the help of its chairperson, Stuart Parker, who many of you may know, who's the chair of the board of Sangamo, among other things. And Maury Ruffin, ARM co-founder, is the executive director of the foundation. And they've got some great projects underway on a gene medicine education program. They're doing a significant health economic impact model, which is super interesting, and there'll be a briefing about later today. And then they're doing a project on the industrialization of cell and gene therapies. I think the foundation is really, it's a tandem organization with ARM. It's meant to kind of add to kind of our energy and efforts in the sector to move the whole sector forward. This is just a graphic we use to describe how it relates to us. ARM primarily on the advocacy side of things, the foundation primarily on the education side of things, with some areas of overlap when it comes to educating certain kinds of stakeholders. The second affiliated organization is the Standards Coordinating Body. This was incubated by ARM a couple of years ago and then sort of spun out as its own independent 501c3 organization, also with its own board, some of whom are represented here. The SEB is now funded. It's got its third tranche of funding from the FDA, and they've got 15 standards advancements projects underway, which I won't attempt to summarize here, but I think for those who are understanding of the role that standards can play in the advancement of manufacturing in this field, this is an important organization you should have your eye on. So, in summary, it's been a really great year at ARM. You know, we've had the pleasure of growing substantially, both in terms of members and in terms of our team. I feel like we've made some important advocacy progress both in the United States and in Europe. Our presence in Europe is much more significant than it was 12 months ago. We have developed new, I think, communications tools and resources for you that we hope you'll find of value, and our sort of early test runs suggest you do. And I think the work that we're doing in the S&T front, this AGENE project, the comparability workshop, and things like that are really helping to move the ball forward in concert with important stakeholders like our regulators around the world. So we're pleased with how the year has gone. I hope you are too. And with that, I think we have a little bit of time if anybody has any questions before we go to the board vote. Everyone's like, really? Oh, more?
Here.
Sorry. Oh, my goodness, okay. This one is working, okay. So Fraser Wright, Stanford University. I just wanted to thank you very much. It was, it's a great, obviously, organization and the goals. I wanted to just maybe ask for your comments. I've been involved with CMC and gene therapy vectors for a while. And I know Dr. Gottlieb, the then commissioner of the FDA, gave a talk at ARM board meeting, I guess, last year. And I think one of his key comments was the fact that for many of the gene therapy programs, when very positive clinical results are showing, what happens is the CMC, which has the standard competencies, I think, for the industry, but is sort of needs to follow a very rapid development course. So I think that that's probably one of the biggest challenges in the CMC for gene therapies, in any case, probably gene and cell therapies. I was wondering if you could comment on that. Is that a focus of some of the S&T discussions you have ongoing?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would just say yes. I think we agree with that that's kind of the central challenge, is that now, given that you can get expedited approval, that many of these, and also that many of the conditions that are being addressed are for rare populations, that you have a small trial size, a small, and therefore kind of a small manufacturing base of knowledge to work from, and that the issues, a lot of the issues center around scale. And how do you go from that kind of initial approval scale to then an in-the-market scale, all the while knowing that you are, I mean, I think that you have comparability, as we talked about, that you've got the right measures of potency. I mean, I think part of the conversation that we're hearing from members is, we're measuring what we know how to measure. We're not always measuring what we know is related to clinical outcomes, and therefore, how do we move forward in that domain, and ARM can help kind of convene a preclinical, pre-commercial, pre-competitive conversation around those things where there are common solutions that could move the whole field forward. But that's what we're hearing a lot, is that that's what people kind of are interested in finding solutions to in that space, both for their conversations with regulators and just as a matter of scientific advance. Does that answer your question? Sure. Okay, well, there are no other questions. Then we might move on to the business part of the meeting. I'm going to hand the microphone over to Phil Vanek from GE, who is the chair of the ARM Board of Directors G&O Committee and the one who leads the process of nominations and the production of this Board of Directors slate.
Thank you, Janet. Oh, let's hope this all works through the process here. So lock the doors, nobody leaves until we get done with this piece of business, unlike last year. But no, more seriously. First and foremost, this is my last, I guess, official business as the head of the G&O committee, so it's been a privilege to kind of serve this organization. As you can see from the data that Janet presented, it's a very diverse and impactful organization, so we're making huge strides and huge progress. So first I'd like to thank the staff and all of you in the room for participating and sort of contributing your time and energy to make ARM what it is. It's a fantastic organization, really happy to be part of it. What are the responsibilities of the head of the G&O committee? One is to make sure there is an official nomination process. For that, I'd like to thank Devin Smith, who I think it's 3 years you've been, 4 years, wow, time flies, that he kindly volunteered his time and energy to undertake this process. And the process is pretty simple. The way it works is back in July, we sort of endeavored to identify a list of candidates who are willing to put up their time, energy, and not payment, or not getting paid for this, but contribute their energy, their efforts into the organization and sort of continue to drive the growth and productivity of what this organization does. And in July, I believe the solicitation to the membership goes out to identify candidates that would be sort of have served the industry or are well known in the industry, or really have just demonstrated the energy and the willingness to sort of step up and be a meaningful part of this team. The other responsibility that the G&O head has then is just make sure that we follow the governance process, and that's a pretty straightforward thing. But more importantly, what we tried to do, and Devin did a fantastic job with a few of the volunteers on that committee, to sort of make sure that the new slate of members represents not only the diversity of the organization geographically, but from a therapeutic area, but also from a racial as well as a gender position as well, to again get the best of the best to serve on this board. So I'm not going to read all the names of the members to you. This has all been provided in the paperwork that's been circulated in advance of this. I will show them on the screen and let you review and read them for a moment. Go back. So with that, I am going to open up the floor to members and directors for discussion of the slate of candidates. Is there any comment from the audience? Anything? Any questions? No, then with none being requested, can I have a motion from the floor that this serve as the 2020 slate of candidates for ARM? And second, please. Here's first and second. So with that, the motion carries, and I'd like to thank and congratulate all the new ARM members and welcome you to this organization. And I guess now I do my mic drop. No. Oh wait. No. We did. That was just the vote. Sorry, we first and seconded. Sorry. Yes. See, same as last year. Every year, I get so excited about the mic drop. May I have a vote from the floor, please, to in favor? All in favor? Any opposed? Thank you, Janet. With that, the motion carries, and we will now move on to the other business of the day. Thanks.